Very warm welcome to all. As you'll have noticed, I'm not Tom Spate, but don't worry, he'll be back next week. And Amy and I are steering the ship this time round. Got a really nice session lined up. I suppose the visual focus, we're going to be talking about the Sankey Photographic Archive and the Round the Island Art and Craft Trail. And we will kick off with Signal Film and Media. Liz, who is the program manager for that fantastic outfit, and Peter Laird, who is a volunteer who is one of several who've put in an immense amount of effort in developing the project around the archive. Welcome, Barbara. Glad you could join us. So first of all, for those who don't know the background, shall we start the slideshow, Liz?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Take over from here if you want me to, no problem.
And so just the background, who were the Sankeys? What is the Sankey Archive?
So yeah, well, it's actually part of my presentation, but I shall do it now. Don't you worry, Chris. So the Sankeys were a Barrow-based family of photographers who, I think Pete will probably back me on this, but he was the son of a horsekeeper who lived down by the railways, and throughout the 20th century, him and two of his sons took images of the area. So they took images of things that were happening. For example, launches. They lived through 2 world wars as well. But also they took pictures of the very ordinary as well. So we've got pictures of people on the streets and kind of really recognizable areas of the town.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here we go. It's the visuals to go with it. Okay. If you give Amy the nod, she'll move things on as you.
I will do. That's brilliant. Yeah, so thanks everyone. Thanks for having us here today. So as Chris said, my name's Liz and I'm the program manager at Signal Film and Media. And I'm joined by Peter Laird, who is a local historian, but he was also one of our Sankey volunteers who worked on the project from the beginning. I joined Signal 2 years ago when it was just coming to the end of this project, and I've been working on the website mainly in the delivery of that. So we're here today to tell you a little bit about the Sankey Online Archive, which launched last week, which was the realisation of a 3-year project digitising the collection of Barrow-based photographers Edward, Raymond and Eric Sankey. I always want to say Edmund, but it's Edward, Raymond and Eric. It's quite a tongue twister. Excuse me. So the project actually finished in April 2022, as I said, but we've been continuing to work since then to produce the final website, which was one of the major aims of the project right at the beginning. And I think Peter will agree with me that it's taken quite a lot of blood, sweat and tears and quite a lot of cake, actually, cream cakes as well. Because there were times when we were nearly ready and then something would break and we kind of were set back again and we kept saying, we're going to launch it. And then it was like, no, it's not ready yet. But we're finally there and we've been really, really thrilled by the response from everyone. So I looked at the analytics this morning and the archives actually reached people in New Zealand, the US, Canada, Spain. I think we had some in Tunisia. And also Finland, I noticed this morning, there was 6 or 7 people from Finland looking at it, which was quite exciting. So we've got Finnish fans of the Sankeys. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the project to give you some context, and then I'll hand over to Peter, who'll go through a bit more about the research he and the volunteers carried out, and he'll also show you some of the images. So he's got the exciting bit, but my bit will be very quick, I promise. Could I have the next slide, please, Amy? Yeah, so Seeing the North with Sankey was a 3-year project which explored the thousands of images taken by the Sankeys, covering around 70 years, from around 1895 till the 60s, really. We partnered with Cumbria Archives, and I know we've got a representative online today from Cumbria Archives, and also the Sankey family, whose support was really invaluable. And a number of other organisations joined us. We had local historians, local history groups, lots of different individuals as well who really contributed to the archive. So we started with a pilot project back in 2018 after securing Heritage Lottery funding. And we began to explore the vast and really largely untapped collection with members of the local community. So the photos on the right are from one of the in-person exhibitions that we did down at Cook's studio. And this was looking at some of the images of the local paper mill, which the Sankeys had taken at the start of the 20th century. So we worked with artist Nikki Bird, and she blew up those images, or enlarged them. That sounds weird, blew up, really weird. No one blew up anything. But we enlarged those images to almost life size. So you could kind of see those people face to face and almost kind of walk into the images. And then the lady at the top right is Jean, and she worked at the paper mills in the 1960s. So although that's not a Sankey photo behind her, it's kind of representative of some of the people who also worked in the mill and shared their memories with us.
And is that her younger self just behind her shoulder?
It is, and I do believe she has a portrait in the attic because she just hasn't aged at all. She was so full of life and so bubbly. Well, still is. She's brilliant. Yeah. Next slide, please, Amy. Yeah, so this, I'm not going to read this out to you, just have a quick look, but this is some of the things the project achieved. So we had the full Sankey collection relocated, negatives restored and conserved, and the collection catalogued and digitized. And we also found lots of, obviously the Sankeys created lots of postcards from their images. So we actually managed to get a couple of private collections that they shared their images with us, and also Barrow archives. So on this website, we've also got postcards of some of the negatives as well, which is really interesting because on the backs of them, there's writing, obviously, of people that have written things on the back and sent them on holiday and from various different places. So it's really interesting. We had an engagement interpretation education program. We produced a book, website, 2 in-person exhibitions, and also a number of online exhibitions as well, because part of this project was done during COVID. So a lot of the work was carried out during that period of lockdown, and films as well. So next slide, please, Amy. I'm trying to be quick because Peter's stuff's really, really cool. So I just wanted to talk about the volunteers quickly, because the volunteers have just been the driving force behind the cataloguing, research and wider sharing of the Sankey collection. From 60 original sign-ups, a core group of 20 spent thousands of hours collating the various documents, postcards and books and searchable database. They've also put together the 7 online exhibitions, co-curated the Dot Museum show, and going through the mill, which was the one about the paper mill I talked about before. And they also produced a calendar for 2022, which contained loads of images and raised over £300 for the British Heart Foundation. And also in the run up to the website, we've had a kind of smaller group that sort of come off the main group who've really been double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking all the data, just to make sure we're consistent, and even things like capital letters and norths, weths, and just making sure things have been written properly. So it's been a phenomenal amount of work, and we're incredibly grateful. Next slide, please. Just really a couple of figures for you and a couple of images. So we had 542 people took part in activity, and we had audiences of over 100,000. So this is a picture of the busy exhibition, the extraordinary and everyday, which was at the Dot Museum back in end of 2021. And then we've also got, as you can see, the large images from the paper mill as well. It's just a couple of images. Next slide, please, Amy. Yeah, so on the 7th of September, which was last Thursday, we finally launched the Sankey website, and that's the address for you there, but I will add it to the chat later. So we launched it to the public. It went live that morning just before 11 o'clock. And then we also opened the gallery so that people who didn't have access to computers could come in and use them, or people that were kind of nervous about accessing the archive could come in. We used some images from past exhibitions, and we also had some brilliant albums from Cumbria archives, shout out to them again, which they let us borrow for the day. So yeah, we invited people in from the local community and further afield, just to explore the exhibition. And we also had the volunteers on hand to help visitors navigate the website and also talk about some of the research and how they went about it. And we had such a brilliant response that we're actually opening this Sunday. So if anybody is in the Barrow area, we have the gallery open again, and we have access to the computers, and you can also kind of look at them on large screen, which you can see on the image there. So you can really see the detail that some of these images have. Right, that's me for now. Let's just give you a brief overview. I'm going to hand you over to Peter, who's going to talk about some of the images and some of the work that he did on the collection.
Thank you, Liz.
Okay, so background, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I certainly can. Thank you.
Yeah, so the background image that you see there is one of the shops. Sankey had 3 shops, 2 in Duke Street in Barrow and 1 in the Coliseum buildings. So this sold photography equipment, postcards, books. One of the things that Edward Sankey did was he actually patented a postcard printing machine, and they could actually print 1,000 postcards a day. So it gives you some idea of the scale of the business that he was in. He started life as a compositor before moving to being a photographer and a collator of local history, it turns out, in the end. So next slide, please. So as Liz said, the Sankeys took photos from about 1895 to mid to the end of the 1960s. So they witnessed the first British submarine. So the top left-hand photograph there is the Holland 2. Holland were the first submarines built for this country. They weren't the first submarines built in Barrow, however. That was Nordenfeldt's 1 and 2, which weren't very good. One of them was scrapped within about 6 months of being built. But they also witnessed the first nuclear submarines, so quite a span. The second image you see there is the Pandora. That's launch day, 22nd of August 1929. We've got dozens of pictures of launches in the collection: liners, submarines, foreign ships, floating docks, ferries. Next slide, please. So the gear that the Sankeys used, at least for the first half of the last century, was cumbersome. If you look at that central image, that's on Burker Fell in one of Sankey's cars. You can see the size of the camera. So wherever they went, they had to cart tripods, cameras, glass slides, lenses. And when you see that they took pictures up Fell and different mountains in the Lake District, they were keen. They must be keen to carry all that weight around. Top left-hand image there is on the Vedra. The Vedra was a ship that blew up in Morecambe Bay. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. Next slide, please. So being Barrow-based, a lot of the photographs are Barrow-centric. And they covered all the important happenings in and around the town, such as the launch of the first British airship. So this is HMA number 1, His Majesty's Airship number 1, built in 1911. Now the top left is the first time the airship came out of the shed. So that's 22nd of May 1911. And you'll notice it's got a keel. You'll also notice on the left another photographer with a plate camera on that, stood on that board. So the airship came out 22nd of May. It spent the night moored in the middle of Cavendish Dock. And just from that little jaunt, they realised that it was too heavy. They needed to lose about 3.5 ton. So they took it back into the shed, worked on it for the next few months, removed the keel, which is why there's no keel on the right-hand picture. But as soon as they brought it out the shed, it snapped in half with the wind. So the mayfly, which is what the locals called it, didn't fly. Next slide, please. So they were there to cover other disasters. And as I've mentioned, the Vedra. So the Vedra was a benzene ship. It got stranded in Morecambe Bay on the 7th of December 1914. There were 36 people on board. When it blew up, 2 of those people got off. The rest were killed. And 1 of those 2 died. So the only survivor in the end was a 17-year-old lad. It was about a mile off the south end of Walney. So they also covered quite a few train crashes. So the one on the right is the train crash in Millom, 26th of February 1913. The train hit the signal box. You can see the levers for the signal box there. There was a signalman inside, a guy called Holmes, if I remember rightly. He was slightly injured, and that was all. And then it took him a few days to lift the train up and put everything back together. The next slide, please. So the images that you've just seen have got full stories. When we were doing the research, if you bear in mind, we've got 9,500 negatives, we've got postcards, we've got albums. We don't have a negative for every postcard. We don't have a postcard for every negative. And the albums are, we haven't got all the albums either. But while we were doing the research, and all of this was during lockdown, or 90% of it was during lockdown, anything that caught our particular interest, we did a bit more research and produced a thing called a photo in focus. So here's a typical one here. This is leading light number 4, which is at Rampside. In the background on the left, you see Peel Island. And if you can see a few chimneys sticking up, that's actually the salt works that were on the south end of Walney. So if you go on the website, you'll find a few dozen of these where we've gone into deeper detail. Just let's right. Yep. Next slide, please. We also did something called Now and Then, or Then and Now, depends how you look at it. So we looked at an image that the Sankeys had taken and tried to reproduce it in modern times. So this is Ramsden Dock Road on Barrow Island. We did this for a few dozen images, and then we also, for one of the exhibitions, we created a film of these Now and Thens. Last maybe 20 minutes. We have got some more of these that haven't been put on the website yet. If you go to the next slide, please. We did a bit of playing around as well and combined the old and new just to see what it would look like and just for fun. Next slide, please. So within the collection, there's hundreds of photographs from around Cumbria. Top left is Keswick, bottom left is, where is it? Bottom left, Fisher Street, Workington, and the right hand side is Mont Saint Michel, because they didn't just take photos in this country. They took photos when in Isle of Man. They took photographs all over the country, presumably while they were on holiday. There's, you know, Shrewsbury, Menai Straits, things like that. Next slide, please. And they took photographs, as I've mentioned earlier, up mountains. Now, this top left-hand one is not a glass plate. It's actually a nitrate negative, if I see that properly. Every image that we've got of the Sankeys is black and white. Even though they went into the 60s and colour had been around for a long time, every image is black and white, probably because it would be easier. If you've ever done developing and printing, black and white is 10 times easier than colour. One of the images I haven't put in, but one thing that Sankeys used to do, they were quite innovative. At the beginning of the last century, Furness Railway used to run steamers from Barrow to Fleetwood to take Barrovians to Fleetwood and Blackpool, and from Fleetwood to Barrow to take people from Lancashire to the Lake District and Furness Abbey. And the Sankeys would be on these steamers. They'd take photographs on the outward journey. While the tourists were ashore, they would develop and print them as postcards, and they would sell them on the return journey. And then they would scrape the emulsion off the glass plates, recoat them, and reuse them next time round. So we've got lots of postcards of people dated on these steamers, but not many, if any, negatives of them because they were reused. Next image, please. So they also documented royal visits. Top left is the King in Vickers, and the bottom right is in Markham, probably the same date. If I remember rightly, it was about 1915. And the final slide, please. So the collection is held and the copyright is owned by Cumbria Archives. It does give a reference there. They're not quite available yet. But the new website, the Sankey website, is accessible to everybody. Liz has shown you the address, but I'm sure you'll get it later as well. And the archive is held under Creative Commons, which basically means you can download them. You can do what the heck you like with them, as long as you give full attribution and they're not being used for any sort of financial gain. If you want to use them for books or something, you need to get hold of Cumbria Archives. You can search them by just looking for negatives, just looking for postcards, just looking for albums, looking for all three, and with and without keywords. So if you want to find a bridge with a horse, search for bridge, search for horse, and you'll get all the images of the 10,000 that are on there with bridges and horses. So that, in a nutshell, is the Sankey collection.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much. And is your relationship with this collection continuing, Peter, in some shape or form?
It is. There is going to be a Sankey 2 project. Don't ask me when it's launching and exactly what's in it, because I'm not 100% sure. But I know that most of the volunteers, this has been our life now for 3.5 years, so we're keen to do more with it. Personally, I use it for some of my local history stuff. I'm giving a presentation next week in the archives on the history of Walney, but using some of the Sankey images as well. So yes, it'll continue. Right.
I was going to say, I mean, obviously, fantastic use has been made of this and the various projects that Liz touched on. So, yeah, I'm sure it'd be great that there's more value wrung out of it in terms of kind of participatory projects and sort of stimulus for other art and history activity. That's wonderful. Yeah. Sorry, Liz. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. No. Just to add to that. Yeah. We basically, I think when we were looking into the archive, we just realized what a vast kind of amount of information, an amount of images that are there. There's women throughout the collection to explore and their kind of role in the 20th century and in Barrow. There's sort of childhood. There's lots of different, and there's also kind of the ship launches, people working. There's loads of different topics that we could explore. So part of the next project will kind of be getting a little bit deeper into some of those images and themes as well. And there's loads we could just do. We could do anything. We could do horses, as Pete said. We could do dogs.
Horses on bridges. Yes.
Yeah, horses on bridges. Yeah, sheep. There's lots of pictures of sheep, so we can do lots of things with it. Really. Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if lots of positive responses in the chat. Thank you. And if anybody has some questions, do stick your hands up, either virtually or physically. Peter, I think you mentioned that a lot of this the work had been done during lockdown, during COVID. Can you just kind of explain, what stage you were at the beginning of 2020 and how the pandemic affected the whole process?
Yeah, so the project started as weekly meetings at Signal, and then a month down the line, COVID hit, and as you know, we were all locked in our houses. So from the original 50 or 60 volunteers, we got down to probably a dozen core volunteers. A section of them purely looked at postcards, and the rest of us we catalogued the albums and the postcards and the negatives, put them all on spreadsheets. So for the negatives, for example, which was the biggest bulk of the work that I was doing, I tried to answer the 5 W's: who, what, why, where, and when. Which is actually easier than you think during lockdown, because such things as you'd be presented with an image, and yes, most of the time you'd know where it is, and you might even know why it was taken. But if you were presented with an image that you didn't recognize, you'd go to the other volunteers and maybe they didn't, but Google Earth was a savior, because you could virtually travel around the world using Google Earth and sticking the little man on the road and trying to get the same view. It was fantastic. And in the 10,000, I bet there's only about a dozen or maybe a couple of dozen that we haven't actually pinned down where they are.
Oh, right. So still a bit of mystery to be solved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. Ian, you've got your virtual hand up. Come on. Do you want to come off mute and ask something?
Hi, thanks for that. It's a big job you've taken on there. I'm just wondering what the archive's views are on retouching. How much retouching do you do if you've got a really badly scratched negative or bits missing off the image?
Right. For all the exhibitions that we did, it was a no. We never retouched anything. Under Creative Commons, however, you're free to do what you like. So I did a presentation a few weeks ago on the tall ships. There was a tall ships thing in Barrow about a month back. So we did a tall ships exhibition using Sankey photographs. And there was one particular photograph that we wanted to use of a ship going under Walney Bridge. And that one I spent about 3 hours taking the scratches and the bits and pieces off it. But up until then, we never retouched anything.
Thank you.
And Liz, is a sort of I can see all sorts of commercial possibilities. Are there kind of going to be postcards? You mentioned there's already been a calendar made using some of the images, calendars, jigsaws. Is there going to be a whole Sankey brand of merchandise?
Not at the moment, not for us. No, I mean, obviously we're working on the project really to share it with people and to look more at the images. We're not planning to do anything commercial, but we do have a book actually that you can buy, but it's more a record of the project really than an actual commercial project. So that's the only thing. That's the only thing we've got, and the only thing we're planning to do at present.
Okay. You mentioned that you've been able to identify that people have been looking at the archive from all over the world, including Finland this morning. Are there any hints or possibilities for any kind of sort of international collaborations? I know with other archives or people who've who've got ancestry in the area, things like that.
I think that's something we'd love to do, and definitely we'd like to explore it as part of the next project. We were actually talking with the Zeppelin Museum in forgotten the name, Friedrichshafen, somewhere like that. Anyway, in Germany, and they were really interested in some of the images of the airships that Peter showed earlier, those kind of rigid airships. So we were having a bit of a chat with them about whether there's some work that we can share as part of Sankey as well, which would be really exciting. I'd love to have even a virtual tour of the museum and a bit of a talk and a share of information. But yeah, there's possibilities as the project develops. Hopefully that will develop as well.
Amy said in chat she's wondering what would have happened to the archive if Signal hadn't started the project. How did that come about? Was the archive sitting there and then Lauren came across it? What was what started the relationship between the Sankeys and Signal?
Yeah. Go on, Peter. No, you do it. Yeah,
right.
You do.
Joan Sankey, who lives at Pennybridge, had the collection in the garage. All the glass plates in boxes on shelf after shelf after shelf, and they'd been, since the shops had closed, they'd been kept by the Sankey family. How exactly it came to Lauren, I don't know, but you're right. If it wasn't for Joan and the Sankey family keeping those images all those years, we'd have never seen most of those pictures.
It's great they've ended up with Signal and now the archive. Obviously the best place for it. Claire Dean is about to be part of Cumbria Archive. Have you had any connection with this so far, or is this something you're going to need to learn on the job?
No, I'm starting at the archives at the beginning of October as a maternity cover for Faye, one of the conservators there. So this is, I've not started there yet. It's a fascinating project and amazing to see those.
Absolutely. I need to move on soon, but can I just clarify? You said that you've got the sort of opening exhibition repeated on Sunday due to popular demand. Can you just tell us exactly where and when that is?
Yeah, so we're open at Cook Studios, which is on Abbey Road in Barrow, and we're open from 11 till 5 o'clock, and you're very welcome to come down. We've got, as Pete said before, we've got the Now and Then film is also on show, so you can see those sort of different images from different times of the 20th century, and then also we've got large images kind of blown up around the hall as well, and we've got some of the albums from the archives on display too, and some postcards as well.
Terrific. Sounds well worth the trip. Thank you both very. Oh, before we go, Derek has his hand up. Yes, Derek, what's your question?
Thank you. I just wondered if there were any plans to tour the exhibition, rather, although some of them are of expeditions, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Again, as part of the next project, I think that's something that we're keen to do, is to share that collection wider. It is quite Barrow-centric, and we did focus on Barrow for the first part, but definitely, I think we'd like, there's images of villages, and I'd love to take one to kind of a community centre, kind of out in a village, and show people the images there as well. But also further afield, there's lots of Blackpool, and I think we're kind of in discussions with the Grundy whether we can kind of do something with them to show those brilliant Blackpool images as well. So yeah, definitely that's on the cards too.
I suspect we might be back on another call to find out further developments in the course of time. Thank you both very much, Peter and Liz, and I hope it goes well on Sunday. I don't think I'm going to be able to get all the way down there, but certainly being able to have a look at it online is a wonderful resource and opportunity. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on now to Al Critchlow from the bottom left-hand corner of Cumbria up to the top left-hand corner of Cumbria. Al Critchlow is an artist based in Bowness-on-Solway, and he's going to tell us about the Open Studios event called Round the Island, which we can have you under the Trades Descriptions Act, because it's not really an island, is it? Or only sometimes.
Thanks, Chris. It's good of you to have me here. So could Amy run through my slides and I'll talk you through. It's called the Around the Island Art Trail because this area is known locally as the island. So it takes place around Bowness-on-Solway, which is, it's like you say, it's about as geographically far from Barrow as you can get in the county. So we're about half an hour west of Carlisle by the Solway estuary, and it's small but really unique and very beautiful. So this is it's quite a forgotten area of Cumbria, I think, and it's rich in wildlife. I mean, it's kind of, a lot of it is a bird reserve. So you're heading into a place that's salt marshes, and you've got the Solway mosses here, so like the raised peat bogs. It's really all about the rhythm of the estuary and this really unique environment. So that's the kind of setting. And then you've got quite a group of professional artists in this little area. And so about 5 years ago, we thought, right, let's do a little open studio thing. And we weren't sure if we would convince anyone to get out here, because it's a bit of a trek. And it went so well that it's kind of grown legs, and now we do it every year. So Around the Island, it's called that because this is a tidal area. So when you get the big spring tides, the road does get cut off. So I'm going to briefly talk you around. Could we have the next slide, Amy, please? Thank you. So to get to us, I'm going to presume that you're coming from Carlisle direction. Obviously, you can come from the other way, but if you do come from Carlisle, you head out past the hospital on the coast road, and you aim for Brough by Sands. And then you get through the village there, and you cross the cattle grid. And that image on the left shows you, this is as you cross that cattle grid, you then come on this perfectly straight road, and you're crossing the salt marsh. And it's like you're kind of aware that you're crossing into a different place. It's quite different. You have these little creeks by the road that fill up, slightly alarming signs at the side that tell you how high the water gets. Don't be deterred. That's only, that only happens occasionally, so you'll be fine. Keep going, and you'll realise you're on a Roman route, really. So this is the route of Hadrian's Wall. Bowness-on-Solway is one end of where Hadrian's Wall used to be. So you probably see a few walkers doing the wall walk, and you'll probably land in a herd of cows. So that you're going to have to go slower at this point. Could we move on, Amy, please? Thank you. So this year we've got 8 venues. The very first one is unusual for us. We've never done this before, but this is Port Carlisle Chapel, which is beautiful. And we thought might be a nice opportunity to have a little display of work, just one piece of work probably from all the artists taking part, and from artists who've taken part in this event in previous years, but that maybe aren't opening their studio this year. So we've got, this is our first venue, I suppose. So you can pick up a leaflet there. Could you move us on, Amy? There's 2 more slides showing sort of a selection, if you like, of previous work. So there's the chapel down in the middle there. And it'll just be a mixture, painting, ceramics, wood turning, sculpture. So although we're very small, we do have an unusual percentage of professional artists. So, it's a very high quality little art trail. Could you move us on again, Amy? Thank you. So there you go. You've got a little selection there from previous years, really, but it gives you the feel anyway. So we're quite excited to use Port Carlisle Chapel. That in itself is super fascinating. So thinking about the Sankey archive, in the first part of the Port Carlisle Chapel, there's a few old photos, and you can see there old black and white photos of when there used to be a viaduct across the Solway linking this area to Scotland, and you can see those old photos and the half-net fishermen, you know, and it's super interesting and a good way to kind of bed yourself in this really unique little area. Okay, can we move onwards, Amy? Thank you. So then I'm going to take you around the order of the numbering order on our leaflet. So from Port Carlisle, carry on the road, you'll get to Bowness-on-Solway, and mine is the first studio you'll come to. So I'm on the left, just as you come into Bowness-on-Solway, and my studio's up a little lane. So there'll be a bunch of signs, bright yellow signs to point you in the right direction. So mine is a kind of quite newly built modern studio, very light. I've only lived here about 5 years, so it is a fairly newly built purpose-made studio. Oh, I've got all sorts going on in there at the moment, so do come and have a look. I've got at one end I've got I'm on with lots of abstract paintings, which are part of a research project I've been on with for a couple of years, which is along with help from the Hedda Stern Foundation in New York. So I'm making a whole bunch of paintings relating to some of her work. And the next slide, Amy, please. And then the other end of my studio, I'm going to be showing quite a few paintings that I made on the west coast of Ireland earlier this year. I did a residency there in February. And so quite a lot of those paintings I'm going to have on show as well. So there's kind of a mixture of stuff and sketchbooks and all that stuff. So come and have a good ooch around. And well, there's a lot of cleaning up to be done, but there will be painty mess, obviously, but I'll try and sort it out a bit. Next one, please, Amy.
I don't know if it's me, but you seem to have gone a little quiet, Al. Have you moved away from your microphone?
Oh, don't know. Shall I shout a bit?
Just project a little bit. Make sure people can hear.
And so the next person along is Rowena Beattie. She's just up the road from me. So she's a sculptor. She makes just amazing work. These are serene, I think, her pieces. So she hand carves stone. Usually, I think she normally uses limestone, occasionally Ancaster stone. I think I've seen pieces in alabaster in the past as well, but I think usually limestone. She's super interested by the idea of sort of transformation and metamorphosis. Could you move us on to the next one, please, Amy? So there's another image from her workshop. You can see on the left there, she's super interested in this idea of when you carve stone, you sort of have a direct link to geological time. You know, you carve into stone, you don't know. We've had some great conversations about this. You don't know what you're going to get until you carve into it. And there on the right, you can see her tools. So, you know, she really does. She uses hammer and chisels and rasps and files. And, you know, she does this the old style way. And she's fascinating to talk to. Okay, could we move onwards? Thank you. So this year, every year we tend to have a guest artist, and this year we've got Mark Gibbs as our guest artist. So as you go through the village, past the pub, and you'll see on the left there, that's Pear Tree Farm, which you walk through that arch, and on the left there's a cafe where you can grab a cuppa, and on the right there's a lovely bright space, which they very kindly let our guest artist use. So this year it's going to be Mark Gibbs, and he's going to have a display of his sculpture and I think maybe some paintings as well. So you've probably come across his work. He's quite well known. The image on the right there is one of his horsemen, and he makes these absolutely exquisite sculptures from a very inventive mix of materials, but usually I think they're based on tiny little strands of wire, and extraordinary sort of intricate processes. He's very interested in conflict and war and the kind of power dynamics around that. So it's beautiful artwork. It's also very thought-provoking. Could you move us on another slide, Amy? So there's another piece by Mark. This is one of his birds. I think this is one of the nightjar pieces. And these are made of paper. So when you look closely, he's kind of made them feather by feather with amazing kind of different patterns and camouflage patterns, etc. Nightjars are kind of, I think, fascinating, partly because they're sort of hidden in plain sight, and I think he explores that whole idea. Right, could you move us on, Amy, please? Thank you. So leaving the village, you go out, there's only one road, so you can't really go wrong. Just keep the sea on the right, and you'll come, after about a mile or so, you'll come to a studio on the left, which is John Rogers' studio. So there's a photo there of John on the left. Very sadly, he died earlier this year. He's spent his life painting, you know, well known as a painter of the Solway, and the most wonderful fluid use of paint. So that's one of his paintings on the right. And you can see he really gets this whole Solway sky, you know, this kind of bigness and brightness. Move us on another one, please, Amy. Thank you. So John's daughter Gillian and his wife Judith have opened up his studio, and they'll have a selection of sketchbooks and his original work to show, and they've made prints of his work as well. And Judith is a talented wildlife photographer, so she'll have some of her photos as well on display. And they live quite near the RSP Bird Reserve, so you know, if you're into your bird watching, you could go and have a wander while you're along there. Right, move us on again, please, Amy. Thank you. So I guess part of the joy of this trail is that you're, having got yourself out here, you might as well explore what is a really quite extraordinary and beautiful place. I mean, it's great today, but you know, it's kind of spectacular even in greyness. And if you do give yourself a whole day, just take your time, you know, really have an explore. So on the right there, that's the kind of view your eye will be drawn to. That's the estuary. You're looking across to Critchley in Scotland. So you keep the sea on the right at all times, follow the little yellow signs, and then as you turn the corner, you'll come to realise that you're actually looking at the Lake District suddenly, and that's a bit magic and a bit weird. And you go through this extraordinary, strange place, which has lots of gorse bushes and old wartime buildings, and that's as you're getting to Anthorn and the great big tall masts. Could you move us on again, please, Amy? So this is the old chapel at Anthorn where Hilary's studio is. To get there, you'll go past these extraordinary tall masts and you'll think, what on earth is that all about? And that's a naval base where, weirdly, they look after Greenwich Mean Time. I know that sounds a bit mad, but they transmit the signal there for, you know, the pips you hear on the radio. It actually comes from Anthorn. So bear that in mind when you go past there. So Anthorn itself is a tiny little place, quiet, beautiful, and you can, how Hilary ever gets anything done, I'll never know, because her front door there, the view, if you stand there, the view is just extraordinary. You look across the Wampool estuary and you've got the Lake District Hills behind. It's just serene, it's beautiful. Next slide, please, Amy. Thank you. So a couple of examples of Hilary's work here. She's a painter, but she also uses sculpture sometimes, mostly porcelain, I think, but I think she's painting at the moment. So these are a couple of recent pictures of hers. And could we move on again, Amy? Thank you. So from there, you turn right as you come out of Anthorn and you go to Newton Arlosh, and you'll find Ray Pearson there. So Ray's master potter, he's amazing, and he's got an amazing setup, lots of kilns for wood firing and all sorts of different things. He's quite experimental, you know. He makes his own glazes from ash and things like this. And if you time your visit right, you might well see him demonstrating throwing pots. So I think he's exploring at the moment a mixture of throwing pots and hand building and kind of putting more than one process into one vessel. So talk to him all about that. He's fascinating, absolutely wonderful man. And the next slide, Amy, if you would. There you can see one of his finished plates on the left there, and see him hard at work on the right. I mean, it's fascinating just to wander around and look at the kilns is an amazing thing. So his place is beside the church in Newton Arlosh, which for those people who are interested in this sort of thing is linked to Sarah Losh, which is super interesting too. Anyway, right, next
Sorry
slide,
to
please.
interrupt, Al, but just he does quite a lot of courses as well, doesn't he? People can
I
go
think
and
he does.
learn
Whether
stuff.
he's got any on right now, I don't know, but you could ask him. He definitely is all set up for teaching, but I'm not sure whether he is doing at the moment. I know he's busy working, making, so you can see on the right there, we've got these kind of yellow sunshiny flags, which every studio will have those displayed to help you get around. But also, just ask when you're at one studio, everyone will point you in the right direction. It's really quite a simple route. The image in the middle, I can't resist. That's just, in my mind, that's the best wood pile in the world. That's Johnny Leach's dad is responsible for that. I think that is pure art. And just, if you get a chance, have a wee paddle. It's a beautiful thing to take time and watch the tide, actually. Could we move onwards again, please? Thank you. Then the last person you're going to come to is Jonathan Leach. So he's based at Greenspot, which is a tiny hamlet about half a mile from Kirkbride, heading back towards Carlisle on the main road there. So Johnny uses, he's a wood turner, and he uses fallen or wind-blown trees for his work. And it's fascinating visiting there. He's got quite a few wood stores and sheds and a whole process. He'll talk you through the whole thing, from kind of chainsawing lumps of wood to kind of making these kind of rough shapes, which he then dries out over the course of a year or two. All of this before they get anywhere near being finished on the lathe. So he needs to kind of see how they'll dry and whether they'll crack and what the character of the wood is going to be. So you can see him on the right there, finishing up making some pepper mills, which are quite a trademark thing. And they are really a thing of beauty. What you can't see here is what they feel like. And what they feel like is silk. It's extraordinary. Could you move us on again, please, Amy? Thank you. There's a couple more examples there. So he uses all sorts of wood. I think it's to do with what becomes available, but very often things like cherry and spalted beech, and I've seen bur elm things he's made, and ash. He'll use what he gets, but he kind of works with the character of the wood. So they really are exquisite pieces that he makes. Could you move us on again, Amy? I am nearly finished. I won't go on all day. So here you go. I think the thing that marks this out is that it really is an open studio tour. So all the artists will be available to chat to, and you are seeing the studios where the work's made. And by and large, we're all professional artists. This is what we do. So by all means, come and look through sketchbooks, or talk about the technicalities and the processes involved. I usually have at least one quite nerdy conversation about paints or paint mediums with somebody, and it's lovely that you can do that. That's what you can't do in a gallery, and I think it is quite special having the chance to come and talk and explore a sort of place you've potentially never been to as well. One more, if you would, Amy. There we go. That's our last one. So please do come and see us. The trail is open on the 23rd and 24th of September, and then again on the 30th and 1st of October. So those 2 weekends, and every studio is open from 11 till 5. I think that's all you need to know. You can just pick up a leaflet when you're here. So please tell all your friends, come and see us. It'd be lovely to show you.
Thank you so much, Al. I can personally attest it's a joyous experience. I've been the last couple of years, and it's an absolutely delightful day out, and wonderful artists. Great to talk to them. Jonathan Leach. I think Jonathan Leach was the first studio we visited the first time we went there, and he gave us about a half-hour tour of his setup and discovering the immense amount of time it takes, kind of from getting bits of tree in at one end and then drying them over enormous periods of time, and then in the kiln, and then wonderful. But his work is fantastic. Thanks to the
generosity. It's fascinating, isn't it? He can. He doesn't. There's not much he doesn't know about wood, and Ray's the same. There's nothing he doesn't know about clay. And I think we've all got our kind of obsessions and interests, and I think each of us can talk till the cows come home about the thing we use and the ideas involved. It really is. If you're into that sort of thing, it's a nice way to spend a day.
Yeah, on the not so nice side, I mean, it's a fairly small trail, small event, but it must still take some organising. Is that you? Is it a kind of joint effort between all 8 or whatever artists? What are the mechanics of the operation?
Yeah, it's a joint thing. So it involves getting together in the pub, let's be honest. It's pretty simple, actually. We get together and make a little leaflet, and Johnny's mum, Marilyn, brilliantly, she is or used to be a graphic designer, so she puts together the leaflet for us, which is why we've got a lovely professional leaflet. And this year we've been super lucky. There's a community group in Bowness who very kindly covered the costs of the printing for us, which is nice. Normally we just all chip in a little bit to cover the costs of that. And we keep it super simple deliberately, and we also keep it small deliberately, because once you get beyond a certain number of people, it gets a bit of a nightmare to organise. So as it is, it's just simple.
So, any questions? Anybody else who's visited before who can share experiences? Has it always been 2 weekends, or has it expanded from? Did you just start off with?
I think it's always been 2 weekends. Yeah, it originally there were just 6 of us. I think Roger Golding, who's not actually doing it this year, but he is a painter as well. He's having a year off this year. He moved up from London, and I moved here from the Lakes at more or less the same time, and suddenly we had enough artists to have a little trail, and we kind of went, oh, maybe we should do that. So Roger used to work for many years for the government art collection, so he's very kindly curating our little exhibition at Port Carlisle Chapel. So it may be small, but it will be beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah. Sorry, and had you been part of a similar kind of an open studios event elsewhere? Was
I do an open studio every year. I've done it always. So I used to do sea art back in the day. For years and years, I had a studio in Threlcourt in the Lake District. Well, I've had a couple of different studios, but yeah, always have done an open studio at least once a year. Partly it's great because it makes you clear up and sort things out. But also I really value, partly it's great to sell work directly, but also it genuinely is usually inspiring and uplifting. You have some amazing conversations. You just don't know who's coming through the door, and you can end up talking about all manner of stuff. It's great, really. So yeah, I've always done that. But I think out here they used to do sea art too, but they struggled a bit to get people out here, just because it's it is the back of beyond. But with more artists in one little place, it's becoming a thing. So since Roger and I moved here, there's then a couple more artists have moved recently. So someone said the other day, we're becoming the St. Ives of the North.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any day soon, we won't be able to afford to live here.
You'll make a killing and move out, won't you? You don't have a website, but there's a Facebook page which Amy has put in the chat for a bit more information from people. But as you say, it's a fairly simple process. If you head west from Carlisle, you can hardly avoid it, really. And hope for decent weather over those weekends. But as you say, whatever the conditions, it's a spectacularly special place.
We mostly hope for no big weather because we don't want the road to get cut off. That's a bit of a clincher. But it won't do. It'll be fine.
Okay. We've just got a couple minutes more. I just wanted to flag up this. So they round the island is not this coming weekend, but the 2 following weekends. As we said, the Sankey Archive show is on this Sunday. Special one-off repeat of that opening exhibition. Also this weekend, right across the county and indeed across the country, it's Heritage Open Day weekend, which you probably know about, but means that lots of places that aren't usually open are open temporarily for you to go and visit. In Cockermouth, they're opening the bell tower on All Saints Church, so I'm hoping to climb up there at some point. Quite a lot of sort of National Trust places you can get in for free. Lots of information about all sorts of sites of historic and artistic interest. And Amy has put an immense link in there, but that is the Heritage Open Days in Cumbria. So that I think Kate Parry did the search, and that's the link that will take you to everything that's on across Cumbria. You can search it by closer areas and so on and so forth. So that's certainly plenty of cultural opportunities out there this weekend. Before we wrap up, has anybody else got any activity ongoing or coming up that they'd like to point people to? Patricia mentioned at the beginning that she's got a show on at Brantwood until October, is it, Patricia? You're on mute, just come off.
Yes, it's until October the 8th in the Blue Gallery at Brantwood.
Okay, and what can people expect to see there?
It's a response to the loss of so many trees in the big storms at the beginning of 2022. So it's photographic and moving image, and I've taken photographs of the root plates of some of the big trees that were blown down, particularly around in the area around Coniston Lake. And I've manipulated them, and they've become sort of creatures. They've become sort of hybrid beings. So I'm sort of talking partly about the damage that was done, but also the hope of new life. And they're supposed to reference both what's physically happened, but also our own responses to it. So it links into issues of climate change and biodiversity and that sort of thing.
Ian, you've got your hand up, and also I can see that you've put a link to Ulverston Lantern Festival.
There you go.
What when?
It's this weekend. It's just a jolly community event that people parade around the town dressed up, carrying lanterns. It's just it's a huge event. I don't know if Chris is involved with it at all. He normally does that sort of thing in Ulverston, but yeah, it's a really good kind of. Oh, there you go. It's got his lantern. So
preview, excellent.
Yeah, it's quite a wacky and interesting event. Just seeing what kind of different lanterns people make, that's it.
Yeah.
I've got the link. I put the link in the chat.
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, and yes, if you were on the call last week and or you've seen the newsletter, you'll know that CACN very happily has got some money from the Arts Council, which means we can expand and extend our activity. And some of the first fruits of that are coming up in October. We've got Ian Tabron, who is an immensely experienced, currently freelance arts consultant, but he was a senior officer with the Arts Council for years. So he's going to deliver some sessions on how to make bids to the Arts Council's project funds, because if anybody knows the insides and outs of that, it's certainly Ian. So those are sessions. We've got two coming up in the middle of October, the 17th and 18th of October, 17th in Barrow at Art Gene, and the 18th in Carlisle at Tully. And he'll also come back again in January and do another one sort of in the east central county, probably Kendal, almost certainly Kendal. All the information about that is on the website. Patricia's put her Brantwood link in there as well. And I think that's quite enough to be going on with. Packed weekends ahead for everybody, one way or another. Hope the evening is clement for the Lantern Festival, and maybe see you out and about in a heritage venue and or around the island in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you very much, everybody, and maybe see you next week when a normal service will be resumed with Tom. Okay, thanks a lot.